This is your Tuesday daily delivery. I am Michael Rand. It is Tuesday morning Nickelback time. Gopher football, Vikings football, bunch of good segments coming your way, starting with Andrew Kramer's film review, looking at why the Vikings can't get the ball to Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen. My least favorite team is my favorite team. Yeah, they were your least favorite team again on Sunday. And Randy Johnson recaps the Gophers' disappointing loss to Illinois. They still control their own destiny, as we all do, going into the last three Big Ten games, but their margin for error much less now after that disappointing loss. Let's get right into things, shall we? It is Vikings film review time here on Daily Delivery. Andrew Kramer joins me every Tuesday, does a great job breaking it down on StarTribune.com in print as well. To find that Tuesday on the website and for your viewing pleasure. Andrew, how you doing?
I'm doing well, Mike. Doing well. No late game scares for the film review, I should say. We save those for the Vikings.
yes, and I think we're going to focus on the offense this week. I mean, there's plenty to get to in a game where the time of possession is tilted that much, where the first downs are tilted that much, but it did feel like to a degree the defense did just get worn down in that game. And part of that was because, between the first two touchdowns of the game the Vikings scored and then the desperation one they scored at the end of regulation, they didn't do very much at all. And so one of the things you looked at as you kind of went back at this game was to find out, okay, Adam Thielen and I did it again. Adam Thielen and Justin Jefferson did not have much to do. I mean, Jefferson caught the deep ball on the first drive. Thielen has 2 catches for 6 yards combined. What they have 5 catches, and what did you say? Where does that rank on their productivity in the big picture of the Vikings?
Yeah, those guys have played a year and a half together now, and those 5 grabs are the fewest they've had in any game. It tied for the fewest, I should say, tied with a blowout win against Detroit last year, in which they just didn't need to throw them the ball. This was a situation where they needed the plays. You're in overtime, it's 3rd and 9, and you have a bad protection call, a bad poor adjustment up front. Watching back that game, I did think they actually missed Garrett Bradbury a little bit because they did have a lot of botched protections, but when they did have the right call, the offensive line sometimes messed up, and we see that all too often. Oli Udoh this time had a really bad game. This is after last week when I talked about Ezra Cleveland having an awful game. So that popped up on the right side. And then Kirk, it just gets into those modes where he's just not going to force the ball to these guys. And I think that's a product of the head coach. I think it's a product of how they want this offense to be run, and Kirk is going to run it the way they want it. And I think Kirk likes to play that way as well. So that frustrates Adam Thielen and Justin Jefferson. And I asked Adam today, because we got to talk to him, just about why were you guys not in sync? Just Adam specifically with Kirk. And he had said there's so many factors that lead into it. Adam said you've got to get open. The quarterback has to read. You have to have the right coverage for you to get the ball. You've got to have enough time for the play called. And then Adam said, I think we ran into every single one of those factors in Baltimore. And watching the game, I think that was absolutely the case, because there were times where Adam was open, Kirk didn't get him the ball. There were times where Kirk could have forced it there. And then there were times where the pass was forced off because of pressure, or the play call was just head scratching. It's just everybody continues to contribute to them losing. It seems like in one way or another.
That's going to be a challenge for a team, because if it was one thing, if you were like, okay, it's just this, you could, either fix that with a personnel change or with a philosophical change, things like that. But if 4 or 5 different things are capable of sabotaging your, intermediate to deep passing game in any specific game, that's got to get frustrating. That's hard to fix a problem with so many layers like that.
Yeah, and winning is the thing that covers it all up, right? So when you win in Carolina the way they did and the offense looked the way it did, you could overlook some of the issues they had specifically early in that game. I think they came out of halftime in Carolina with back-to-back 3-and-outs. It looked like it was going to be the same issues, but they win. And the fact is they're just not fixing enough of these problems in those critical moments, those situational moments, the third downs, the red zones, right after takeaways. They last 4 takeaways going back through the Cowboys game. They've scored 3 points, and you get that Anthony Barr interception and you turn it into nothing. You get the Bynum interception, you turn it into 3 points. In Baltimore, you just can't be wasting away those kind of opportunities when the margin is so razor thin. So I think winning covers up so much. And if they just did a little bit more of that, they wouldn't seem so bad. The problems wouldn't seem so everywhere because we wouldn't focus on them with such a microscopic lens. But when they continually show the inability to fix enough of them, they're just a bad team. I just think they're a talented but bad team because collectively they have not played well together. Whether you go back to Arizona on special teams and you go back to the offense in the last couple games.
Now, it does feel like if one thing can, I'm going to say if one thing can fix everything, but if there's one kind of overarching thing that might be able to solve a few of these problems, it does feel like it rests on Clint Kubiak's shoulders. It rests on how does he scheme these guys open better? How does he buy Kirk Cousins more time? How does he get these guys synced up? Would you agree with that? That if there's going to be a marked improvement, I'm not saying it's all his fault, but I'm saying it would probably come from that direction, not from the offensive line magically getting better or Kirk Cousins becoming a different kind of quarterback all of a sudden.
Yeah, because they do need to get Kirk back comfortable. And this is one of those things where you've always had to manage this with Kirk Cousins. You know what you signed up for by now. This is his fourth year here. So with Clint, it's a matter of getting the running game going, getting those easy completions early in games. And the thing is, they've done that, which is the puzzling thing, that why they keep stepping on their own foot. Penalties, for instance, have been horrendous for them. They're one of the most penalized teams on offense in the league. They lead the league in offensive holding. That popped up again on Sunday in Baltimore. These things keep putting them behind the sticks. And then, as we've talked about with Kirk, this is not an offense that is structured to make explosive plays when the defense is expecting it. Like the offensive line is not built for it, and Kirk is not really built to take and force those kind of shots downfield. And so when you talk about fixing things and kind of moving forward, I think Clint needs to find a way to keep the energy going, keep Kirk comfortable, and then find a way to get easier completions for Adam and Justin. Easy completions are not easy to come by in the NFL, obviously, but you've got to scheme some of these things up. And they're trying with receiver screens. They're trying with some of the underneath stuff. But at this point, like on Sunday in Baltimore, you've got a defense that just puts like 10 guys by the line of scrimmage. And then once you get them in a 2nd and 10, then they'll back up and then you're just dead in the water. And it's been kind of that same story. I think Dallas did something pretty similar.
Yes, they did. Well, we'll see if they're able to figure anything out. They've got, the Chargers up next. And after that, Green Bay, say what you want about what happened against Kansas City, only scoring 7 points without Aaron Rodgers, but their defense has been a lot better lately too. And that will not be a picnic. You got the Rams later on this year. I mean, it's not, figuring this out is not just going to happen by way of competition.
No, and the problem is too that the defense actually played, I thought, pretty well. And you and I talked about before we started recording that the first half they held Lamar Jackson down pretty well. They wore him down. You got 90 plays on defense. That never happens. That's a career high in playing time for Everson Griffin, who's been in the league since 2010. And with Mike Zimmer's side of the ball, like, you're not getting Danielle Hunter back. It's going to be another game for Patrick Peterson. Harrison Smith will also be out. Justin Herbert is the most accurate quarterback you've faced since Russell Wilson. It's been a while. They've gone through a stretch of pretty inaccurate quarterbacks. Lamar Jackson is great, but he's not accurate. And that's why they were able to take advantage of some of those things. And when you fail to capitalize, when the defense makes the plays you got to make, especially in those critical moments, it's the 2021 theme. It's just wasted opportunities for this side. And I don't think it's going to get easier because, like I said, defensively, there aren't any real reinforcements coming down the road.
No, they really needed to win that one, and they had an opportunity. And if the offense could have done a little bit more, they might have done that. Andrew Kramer, good stuff. Follow him and follow that film review. Check it out on StarTribune.com on Tuesday. Thanks, Andrew. We'll see you later.
Hey, thanks, Mike.
Interesting stuff from Andrew Kramer. His film review is live on the website right now, by the way. And one thing I think is interesting about Adam Thielen in particular, average yards per catch this season, only 10.6. He does have 7 touchdowns, so he's getting into the end zone, but 10.6 yards per catch would be a career low by a fairly wide margin. Last year, averaged 12.5 yards per catch. 2 years ago, 13.9 yards per catch. So, when you think about him, they're utilizing him in much different ways, probably a little bit more, shallow routes and things like that. Not the deep threat that he once was, Not necessarily because he's lost a step, but probably because they can't get him the ball down the field.
Take a playcation to Mystic Lake. With 24/7 gaming, the good times never have to end. And you can satisfy your cravings at our restaurants and bars. Or relax in one of our luxurious hotel rooms. Those that play together, stay together. And don't forget to join Club M so you can spark new memories and bask in the rewards along the way. Follow the lights to Mystic Lake, where every day is play day.
It's my least favorite team, is my favorite team, the Vikings, Keith Richotte. Keith, I don't know if you've seen that game we saw on Sunday before, but I sure have. Just, again, the offense starts off well, gets them a lead. The defense can't hold it. The offense rallies when they need it the most, and then they still lose. Have you seen that game before? Because I've seen that game before.
I feel like about 8 times over the last 2 months I've seen that game. About 8 times.
They've only played 8 games. They've only played 8 games.
I know, it's strange, isn't it? It's strange. Like varying degrees of how it ends up, but it is basically the same thing. And I don't know about you. I don't know, but I found myself befuddled at the end of this game. I really want to be able to focus my rage, but I don't exactly know where or how to focus the rage for this game, because it was full of all of the things that happen when the Vikings win a game, but it was also full of all of the things that happen when they lose a game too, right? And so it was hard for me to try to pinpoint, say, who is most at fault for this loss, in the sense that you could talk about the defense in previous games or kicking or failures in other aspects. There was everything. There was everything in both their victories and their losses in this stupid game.
Yeah, it wasn't the special teams' fault. They ran a kickback for a touchdown. They executed a fake punt. They made all their kicks. Definitely don't focus your rage on the special teams in this game. But like we've talked about so many times, this team has so many holes that they will have a problem inevitably something will go wrong in a game, and it's whether they can overcome what goes wrong. And in a game like this, where you're down Danielle Hunter, you're down Michael Pierce, you're down Patrick Peterson, and oh, by the way, not long before, Sunday comes along, you find out you're without Harrison Smith, which I don't know how much hurt them, because Cameron Bynum, who stepped in for Harrison Smith, actually had a really nice interception and played a pretty good game, but still you're missing a lot of your core defensive pieces. Baltimore had, I talked about this on Monday's show with Royce, Baltimore had 36 first downs. The Vikings had 13. It was such a lopsided game aside from the scoreboard.
Well, yeah, that's absolutely correct. But in some ways, I don't know why I feel this way. Maybe it's because, again, I watch the games in the 45-minute chunks. I watch the hurried up version so I don't get all the in-between stuff. And then we talk about it for 15 minutes. So I can really only handle this team for 1 hour a week.
That's
right?
That's an optimal amount of time. Either that or 0 would be the optimal amount of time for this team.
I am trying to work my way down to that. I can't quite get there. But yeah, I can only give 1 hour. But in some ways, it almost felt like the defense played well in a way that even when they gave up less points in other weeks, it felt like they didn't. And part of it was Lamar Jackson was not particularly accurate that day. Or maybe it was just because most of it was running and you didn't see too many of the big passes or what have you. But it sort of felt like they played well. They had the 2 turnovers. They even had that moment with Anthony Barr's spectacular interception where it looked like it was possible that Zim would finally get his wish and have the defense be the heroes. And yet they still gave up, 34 points, right? Still gave up 4,000 yards of offense.
Yes,
they were
almost, I think 500 or so. That's a lot.
They were still actually not very good. And so even though it kind of felt like they played well and they were facing all the adversity that you mentioned and having all those players out, you would expect them not to be at their finest, but they still failed at the end as well too, right? They had all the characteristics of when this team loses.
Yeah, and they couldn't stay on the field on offense in the second half, and that was a big part of the problem. The time of possession was 2-1. Like Baltimore, and obviously it's an overtime game, so it gets skewed a little bit. But Baltimore had the ball for 46 minutes, and the Vikings had the ball for 23 minutes. So it's like, yeah, they put up 31 points. Part of that is the special teams run back, and part of it's, the 2 quick touchdowns. And then they do get that drive at the end to get themselves into overtime. But again, it's the in-between that they I don't know what happens on offense, but the in-between, they're not good at all.
Well, it's, again, you get the good and bad, right? They scored 24 points on offense, which is a nice output, but the whole second half was just 3 and out and 3 and out and 3, and it was just ugly. And they did what they do. They came back and they scored exactly like you said, that late touchdown, but then couldn't finish off at the end. And so it's the same thing, both the good and the bad. They put up points and they had their moments, but when it came right down to it, they couldn't succeed. And I'm starting to maybe possibly think that 17-year-old Clint Kubiak shouldn't be offensive coordinator. It's maybe a bad situation where the head coach basically wants to be an overpaid defensive coordinator and cedes all the rest of the authority of the offensive coordinator to give this to somebody who's very unproven and hasn't seemed to gone up through the ranks. He reminds me of Ryan Saunders a little bit, right? And that everybody said, well, someday he might be good at this, but it was just a little bit too early. How is this not Clint Kubiak, and how is this not the absolute worst situation when you have a head coach who has no interest in actually engaging with the offense until he finally has to have his hour meeting once a week with his quarterback?
Well, and odd that they would trust this year to someone so unproven, even if they had some confidence in him, even if they thought that continuity for Kirk Cousins was probably the most important thing in the offense, as opposed to maybe more experience in that chair. Because I think he has struggled outside of the scripted plays in finding the right rhythm for the offense. I just feel like there's times where the call just feels odd, where it's either predictable or it's like, why are you doing that there? Like, you need this and you're doing that. And if we can see that at home from our couch, and again, we're the experts, it's easy to second guess, but it does feel that way in real time, that the calls that they're making don't feel like they match the rhythm of the game.
Well, you think the run on second down, second and long is...
I'm screaming at the TV, and my kids are like, they can't hear you. And I'm like, I know they can't hear me. I understand that they can't hear me, but I'm going to yell nonetheless because it's frustrating. It's frustrating to watch, and then again, they're able to overcome some of this. And sometimes it works, occasionally it works. It works just enough to fool them into thinking it's going to work more than it does. But they put themselves into these bad 3rd and long situations. And then 3rd and long, like Ben Gessling wrote about on the website Monday, it's just a death knell for them because they can't pass protect.
It also raises the question, at what price do you expect your high-paid quarterback to actually take ownership as well, too? If he was making $13 million, we could maybe forgive the not taking over or not asserting yourself when you should be the person who does that. You're the actual one on the field, right? At $33 million, he should be doing that. Maybe at 13, we could maybe say not, or if he's on some rookie scale contract. So at what price? At what price do you expect that out of your quarterback? Because you're not getting it right now.
I mean, I think you should expect it at $33 million. The problem is that's never been Kirk Cousins. And so they bought a quarterback whose skill set they knew was limited in a certain way. Like if they surrounded him with the right situation, which I think they thought they had after 2017, that they could thrive, but they've given him the right offensive skill position players. I mean, they've given him a great running back, and they've always had 2 really good wide receivers, and their tight ends have been fine. Irv Smith probably would have helped even more this year, but they've never been able to get the offensive line right. And if they don't get that right, everything else is kind of moot with him, because he's not the kind of guy, like we've talked about 1,000 times, who's going to extend plays and is going to take ownership of a game if he doesn't have the time. And there's been times this year where he's had the time and he's been great, and the other times he's just not. And again, you'd like to think that $33 million buys you that, but with Kirk Cousins, it doesn't.
No, it certainly doesn't. And that's part of the yin and the yang with that guy as well, too, in that he can be very good. But one of the things that I noticed, and again, with my knowledge, I haven't broken down the All-22 film just yet, but it seemed that at the beginning of the game, the offensive line was able to hold up a little bit. And as that game kept going, it just got worse and worse and worse and worse, to the point where at a certain point, you almost can't blame Kirk because he didn't have any time. There was somebody in his face immediately. And it's so difficult because it's both of those things. It's not just that Kirk can't make the plays that a Lamar Jackson can, right? But it's also that sometimes he is in that impossible situation too, because has not been very good. And Baltimore figured something out, because it just felt like there was this erosion until it was almost all gone by the end of that game.
It did seem, and I'll probably talk to Andrew Kramer about this. I probably did talk to Andrew Kramer about this a little bit, but it did seem like the pressure started coming up the middle. Like Baltimore figured out that that's how you get to Kirk Cousins, started picking on Mason Cole a little bit, started picking on the guards a little bit more. And that's the key to breaking down the Vikings pass protection typically. Let's finish up quick here. I mean, they got to be getting frustrated now. They've had so many close losses. If we're frustrated, if fans are frustrated, the team, the players have to be frustrated too. I mean, the next two games are no picnic. You got at the Chargers and then home against Green Bay. And assuming Aaron Rodgers is able to play and available and the woke mob hasn't driven him out of town.
I need to stop you there. Because I know that you've talked about it a lot, but I have not yet had the opportunity publicly to luxuriate in his stupidity, in his utter ridiculous stupidity, and putting himself in that situation and deciding to blame others for his bald-faced lie that he knew was just ultimately a lie, and managed to get away with it for half of a season. And as a Vikings fan, you know this, as a Vikings fan, there's not a lot to hold on to in terms of championships and success and all that kind of stuff. So sometimes the best feeling is watching Green Bay go down in flames and just having this little bit of Aaron Rodgers' stupidity and watching him try to blow up that franchise. And I didn't get to see any of the highlights, but clearly the Packers did not look good in their loss.
Probably could have used him. They scored 7 points, and it wasn't that 7 didn't come till late in the fourth quarter.
And so, staring off into the future when Aaron Rodgers is finally chased away by the woke mob just kind of feels good, right? That there's maybe hope that at some point we will once again be able to live in a world where the Packers don't have a Hall of Fame quarterback basically winning the division for them every year.
Imagine how bad that division could be next year if they do run him out of town and the Vikings are in a rebuild and the Bears are still bad and the Lions are still the Lions.
You're talking about a 7-10 team winning it. I mean, it really is going to be atrocious. And I'll be sitting there every Sunday with my iPad watching for 45 minutes, hoping that the Vikings are the one to get to 7.
Steer into that skid, baby. Well, we'll see. It feels like the year is, I don't know if it's completely off the rails yet. You can always win a couple games, and last year they were 1-5 and they got to 6-6. So you never want to say never, but it's they can't feel good right now with the way things are going and just knowing what's ahead of them. It's going to be hard to see any kind of path that's getting them anywhere good this year.
Well, how is it going to get fixed? How is it going to get fixed?
None of these problems are fixable right now. That's the problem.
And so last year, I guess you could say there were some deficiencies and they were able to make some changes or what have you. It is impossible to see how any of this is going to get better. The offense is not going to get better. Zims is not going to help out on the offense anymore. His defense is going to continue to be bad. Maybe we can get more kickoff returns for touchdowns.
That was a bright spot. All right, we'll do this again next week. I'm sure it'll be great.
Oh, yes, I'm looking forward to it.
By the way, if it feels like the Vikings are playing a lot of overtime games this year, that's because they are 3 already. That's as many as they played in the last 5 regular seasons combined. So, yeah, definitely a lot of drama in these first 8 games, including those 3 overtime games. Vikings have won just one of those, that one over Carolina. Tuesdays on Daily Delivery, I like to talk to Randy Johnson, covers the Gopher football team for the Star Tribune. Randy, we've been saying for a few weeks now that the Gophers were going to need to know how to pass the ball at some point this season. I don't think we thought that was going to have to be against Illinois because, the pedigree of that team, you thought this was going to be another win where they could, go in there and run the ball and probably win the game. That said, they get down 14-0 and they the offense can't muster, more than 6 points in that whole game. Is this an example of they just can't do that one thing? They can't pass, which is pretty important. And that, the thing that we didn't think they could do or wondered if they could do is still a problem.
Yeah, that's part of it too. I think a lot of it has to do with the offensive line play, which the offensive line did not have a great day, and that ended up with putting a lot of pressure on the passing game and on Tanner Morgan. He was sacked 6 times. When they had to throw, the defensive line pinned its ears back. They did some blitzing, and that caused a lot of problems. The recipe to beat this team is to get ahead of them and make them play from behind and see if they can. They have usually such a good running game. If you can shut that down, you really make them play left-handed in coach speak, take away their strength and make them try to do something they're not used to doing.
How, it's 14-0 pretty quick. How did we even get there? Do you feel like there was I think there's a cliche that teams start to look ahead to other teams. I think this team's been pretty good at not doing that, but Iowa looming next week, and we'll get to that in a little bit. Big Ten, they were the Big Ten West leaders going into that game. Any element do you think there of either looking ahead of this one or the pressure catching up to them and all of a sudden they're down 14-0? No,
I think it was probably more of a situation where maybe stunned a little bit early. Tanner Morgan gets a pass tipped. Illinois gets an interception, and then they drive it 49 yards right away to go up 7-0. Kind of a stunner against the Gophers defense. I mean, it was a bit of a short field, but they had their chances. They had trouble all day with Chase Brown, the running back. Goes for 145, was it? So yeah, they had their 150. They had their issues stopping him. He would always keep the pile moving forward. They settled down after the second quarter. The defense did, but by then, the offense just wasn't able to respond the way it needed to.
Now, I think I've asked you this, after the Bowling Green loss, but, this seems like they're pretty steadfast in sticking with Tanner Morgan, their experienced quarterback. Is there anything they can do to help him in these situations if that is going to be their guy, someone who's now not terribly mobile, and when the offensive line does break down like it did on Saturday, has his own issues trying to avoid the rush?
Yeah, I would think they would maybe go to some more shorter passes. Get those. There were a lot of slow developing routes on Saturday. Maybe they need to rein those in a bit. Get something more quick hitting. Get Tanner in a rhythm. I mean, you don't want to take that completely away because that's where they've gained a lot of important yards using their kind of passing attack that just picks its spots. But they got in a game where they couldn't use the passing attack as a complementary weapon. It had to be the primary one.
They can't beat Bielema either. Isn't Bielema 8-0 against them now?
8-0 against Minnesota. That was the first time he had faced PJ Fleck, but 8-0 against Minnesota. So it's got some type of hex there, I guess.
Yeah, he does. Well, obviously big games ahead still. I mean, even with that setback, and we've seen this team be resilient. Obviously, after the Bowling Green loss, they came right back and played much better, rattling off a bunch of wins in a row. So they have, opportunities still in front of them. At Iowa next week, Iowa's had its own struggles, didn't beat Northwestern by that much this past week. It has lost, 2 since their really good start. Feels like on paper, like this won't be a shooting match, won't be a high scoring affair, but you never know. How do you kind of start to sort this one out with, both of those teams part of that 4-team log jam at 4-2 in the Big Ten West now?
Well, first and foremost at Iowa, it should be it could be kind of a rock fight there. It'll be should be a low scoring game where the Gophers could get in trouble, and Iowa this year is feasting on turnovers. They were plus 14 in their 7 wins and minus 3 in their 2 losses. So they basically you got to make sure you don't give them the ball. That's been their fuel this year. They don't have the most dynamic of offenses, but they can run the ball pretty well, and they're very good on defense. They're very stingy against the run. They have veteran defensive linemen. It's going to be Gonna be a challenge for that Gophers offensive line. They've carried the mail most of the year. Here comes the time of year where they really need them.
Did you get the sense after Saturday's loss? I know we don't get as much of a sense of the mood as maybe we used to, but what have been your takeaways in the aftermath of that loss as they kind of, think about regrouping for Iowa?
Well, they always go back to their one game at a time, one game championship season, as they call it each week. And I think, that approach is something that can serve them well when you do lose, you just, worry about the next game, worry about the next thing up on the schedule. Don't dwell on that one too much. Take the lessons from it. But yeah, I don't think they should have any trouble getting up for this game. They're 0-4 against Iowa under Fleck, so it's one that they should be pretty fired up to try to win this. It's they haven't won at Kinnick since 1999, so it's a long time coming.
I didn't realize it was that long ago. That's crazy. I'm trying to think of who was even on that 1999 team. That's a ways back.
That's the team the Glenn Mason team that beat Penn State when they were number 2 in the country. Ended up going to the Sun Bowl and played Oregon. That was the first Gophers bowl game since '86. So Billy Cochran was the quarterback. Thomas Hamner running back. Tyrone Carter on that team.
Tyrone Carter. There you go. Well, that was a while ago then. No doubt about it. Well, last thought. I mean, they still control their own destiny, right? If you think about the winning the last 3 games would assure them of, would assure them of winning the Big Ten West because they have tiebreakers. They'd have any tiebreaker over anybody else, and things like that.
Here's the deal there. It's both them and Wisconsin control their own destiny. Wisconsin has wins over Purdue and Iowa. That they're playing the Gophers. The Gophers have a win over Purdue. They play Iowa and Wisconsin. Iowa lost to Purdue and Wisconsin, so they're in the toughest shape, even though they have the best overall record. So the Gophers' path is pretty clear. You win all 3, you go to Indy. There is a way for them to get there if they would lose to Indiana and beat Iowa and Wisconsin. Now, not an easy trick to pull off, but if they would go 2-1, finish 6-3, got into a tiebreaker situation, had those 2 other wins, they would win on head-to-head with all 3. If whoever came into that tiebreaker situation. So the one thing about that, they have not beaten both Iowa and Wisconsin in the same season since 1990. I remember that while I was working for the Minnesota Daily at the time, covering Gophers football.
Jeez, I feel like all of these accomplishments go back way too far. This program needs some more mile markers that are a little more recent. Well, it's still in front of them, like you said. It's and if you can say a couple things about this team, in this program. One is that they've already shown they're resilient this year, and 2, PJ Fleck's teams have tended to get better as years go on. So we'll see. It could have just been an anomaly, kind of like Bowling Green, or it could be something more that we should be concerned about.
Yeah, it is interesting that the times they were the biggest favorites, 31 points against Bowling Green, 14.5 against Purdue. They lost on both of those.
Against Illinois, you mean? You said Purdue.
No, I'm talking about Illinois. Yeah, sorry there.
No, that's okay. Well, good stuff, Randy. I'm sure we'll look forward to your coverage from Iowa. I believe Chip Scoggins will be there as well, so we'll have double coverage down there. You guys can each cover one of the points in the game.
You never know. We'll see how it goes here.
All right, thanks, Randy. Talk to you later.
Thanks a lot, Mike.
Good stuff from Randy Johnson. Now, raw yardage isn't everything, but Gophers rank 122nd out of 130 FBS teams in passing yards per game, 154.6. By the way, Wisconsin just barely ahead of them, 155.6. Iowa is at 185.3. So, yeah, those final 3 games, the 2 big ones in particular against Wisconsin and Iowa, should be won on the line of scrimmage with running games, not the passing game. That'll do it for today. Might have to dig into the Wolves a little bit on Wednesday's show. Another disappointing loss on Monday. They had that one against Memphis and then gave it away. Some weird body language. The postgame wasn't great. Have to break that down at some point as well. Thanks for listening today. We'll be back at it on Wednesday.